that have a standing in Benton Harbor. We're here with you today to talk about an operation that has been a development of investigation that's going on that culminated in some arrests this morning. We'll turn it over to U.S. Attorney Mark Totten. But I'd like to first thank each law enforcement agency that has participated in this effort. That's multiple agencies on the federal, local, and state level. I don't think I can name them all, but as you know, we've seen in the Benton Harbor area, between us, Benton Township, we kind of look at ourselves as one and the same, brother and sister agencies, proliferation of gun violence in our community. Many of our shooting scenes have been with automatic weapons. We've reached out and had great support from the state of Michigan as well as the federal government with resources from the ATF, the FBI, U.S. Attorney's Office. So we're very grateful. There had been an investigation that had been started and put together. Again, that culminated in today. But again, we want to acknowledge the law enforcement agencies that took part, acknowledge the U.S. Attorney's Office for understanding the importance. As you know, Benton Harbor is a little small community and we're kind of in a vacuum because we're not quite in Kalamazoo, we're not quite in South Bend, we're not quite in Chicago, we're not quite in Grand Rapids. So sometimes it feels like we're kind of here by ourselves with all that goes on. So again, the support has been overwhelming. Again, the state police, the sheriff's department, Benton Township, the other agencies has been great. So we appreciate the work that has been done. And I'm also pleased to say that not just because of this, but other efforts that the Benton Harbor Department of Public Safety as well as Benton Township have undergone, that we have seen a reduction in gun violence since October of this year. So these things work. We're very pleased that they are working. And with that being said, I want to turn it over to U.S. Attorney Mark Totten, who will speak to overall the scope, and then from there we'll get some details of this operation. And we thank you all, even the media have been very respectful, been very communicative. We appreciate the relationship that we have with you, and we'll make sure that we have all these relationships going forward as we make Benton Harbor and Benton Township a better place and a safe place to live. So with that being said, introduce U.S. Attorney to the Western District of Michigan, Mark Totten.
Thanks so much, Chief McGinnis. Thank you all for being here today. Again, my name is Mark Totten. I serve as the United States Attorney for the Western District of Michigan. Early this morning, a coalition of federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement officers executed multiple arrest and search warrants here in Benton Harbor and also in Grand Rapids. Around 12 noon this afternoon, a federal court in Grand Rapids unsealed a criminal complaint charging 11 individuals with various firearms and narcotics charges. Today's charges follow an investigation that has spanned more than a year. At the heart of this action is a conspiracy to illegally traffic firearms and firearm conversion devices. These devices go by many names. The name I will use today, what they're often referred to, is switches. 7 defendants face charges related to the possession and the transfer of these devices. Once installed, a switch can transform an ordinary semi-automatic pistol into a fully automatic machine gun. A switch can be installed in less than a minute and with little technical knowledge. Once installed, these devices can enable a semi-automatic pistol to fire over 1,000 rounds in a minute with a single pull of a trigger. I've asked Special Assistant Agent in Charge from ATF, Chris Calamai, to offer a few remarks shortly to better explain what switches are, how they're made, where they're coming from, and how they're being distributed. Over the past few years, we have seen a significant rise in violence related to firearms across America and here in Michigan as well. The emergence of switches is especially concerning. They pose an emerging threat to our communities, to our children, to our law enforcement officers, and to anyone who stands in the path of their indiscriminate spray. Their destructive capacity is frankly staggering. Today's action represents a major step forward in our efforts to combat this threat. At the moment, these devices are not widespread, and we're going to do everything that we can to try to keep it that way. The people of Benton Harbor and every other community across Michigan deserve living in peace. Before I close, I want to express my deep gratitude to the many, many law enforcement agencies that were involved in this morning's operation. In total, there were more than 200 law enforcement officers that were involved. This investigation represents a remarkable multi-agency effort that involved a dozen agencies, including the following: the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who served as the lead on the investigation; the Michigan State Police Southwest Enforcement Team; the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives; the Drug Enforcement Administration; the Department of Homeland Security; the Benton Harbor Department of Public Safety; the Benton Township Police Department; the Berrien County Sheriff's Office; the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi Indians Tribal Police; the Michigan Department of Corrections; and the United States Postal Inspection Service. For my office, I want to thank my criminal chief, Alexis Sanford, and Jonathan Roth, Deputy Criminal Chief for Violent Crime, who are both here today. And I also want to thank Assistant U.S. Attorney Patrick Castle, who's serving on the case as well. With that, I will turn the podium over to Assistant Special Agent in Charge David Porter from FBI Michigan.
Hello, everyone. As noted by U.S. Attorney Totten, more than 200 law enforcement personnel participated in today's operations. Those dedicated men and women arrested 5 individuals on federal charges and an additional 4 on state charges. They also executed 5 federal search warrants, 3 state search warrants, and 2 probation searches. This is how law enforcement should combat violent crimes in communities like this one, through partnerships, just like this. You're not in this alone, Chief. No egos, no withholding of information, no grandstanding, just hard work, collaboration, and partnerships. Now, while the FBI plays a significant role in combating violent crime across the United States every day, we do not and cannot do that in a vacuum. We can't do that alone. We confront the plague of violent crime and the distribution of firearms and drugs and the havoc that it wreaks upon our communities. We confront them like this, together. The men and women of law enforcement, along with the communities that we serve. The good people of Benton Harbor deserve no less than that. And I'll turn the podium over to Assistant Special Agent in Charge with the ATF, Craig Calamai.
Good afternoon. Every day on the streets of this country, ATF agents work with their community law enforcement partners, both federal, state, and local, to bring criminals who illegally possess firearms to justice. Today was no different. To touch on what U.S. Attorney Totten said in regards to these types of firearms and components, basically they are commonly referred to as switches. They have several different names: Glock switches, auto sears, conversion kits. But the basic reason behind them is to convert a firearm from firing a single shot to multiple shots with one pull of the trigger. If you can imagine the dangers that increases for both law enforcement and the community, because when illegally used by criminals on our streets, when that individual now has a weapon that is converted with a auto sear or a Glock switch, he has the ability to fire multiple rounds either at law enforcement or at the community, creating far more danger because those bullets have no names. They will go everywhere. So we will continue to work alongside our federal, state, and local partners to identify, interdict, and arrest individuals who are illegally both manufacturing through 3D printing or receiving these types of switches through the mail from overseas, or manufacturing at their homes when they are legally selling them and being converted to be used by criminals on the streets. We will work together to continue to bring those individuals to justice. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we're gonna open it for questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I'm.
No worries,
I
I saw your hand.
I guess my first question would be, you mentioned at the start of this that there is not widespread use of these switches yet, and today, marks a significant step in preventing that from furthering. Can you just give us an idea how common it is to see these types of switches, and then what additional actions can be taken to make sure that these do not get out into a more widespread use among communities?
Thanks for the question. I will maybe offer just a few comments and then offer to David or Craig if they want to add anything as well. Certainly these devices have been seen all over the United States. We've seen them here in Michigan as well, so we don't want to suggest otherwise. We're concerned that these switches pose an emerging threat. Again, they're a very simple device. They can be installed in less than a minute, and they can wreak unbelievable havoc. Today's enforcement action, I think, represents a significant step forward to help quell this threat. We want to try to really stop the pipelines that are starting to emerge where these are being distributed. If you look through the complaint, you will see that while some of these devices were either being acquired or manufactured here in Benton Harbor, they were starting to spread to other places. You'll see in the complaint that there was a sale that went into Grand Rapids, and we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure every community in Michigan, starting with Benton Harbor, is free from these really terrible devices. David or Craig, is there anything you want to add?
So prevention is very difficult. With the proliferation of these devices through social media, there are different ways that they can be obtained, different ways that they can be manufactured. So this example today is a way that we can combat that by spreading the awareness, working with our local partners, training, things like that is what ATF does, so that when our local partnerships come across these devices, they know what it is, they know who to call, they know where to go, so that we can initiate these types of investigations so we can get to the core of where they're coming in. I mean, they have the ability to ship them in overseas. Like I said, they have the ability to manufacture them themselves. So it's really just once we identify one of these kits or these auto sears, is having these local collaborations with local law enforcement and our partners so that we can address it immediately. So that's one of the ways that we can.
Is it more to get these items off the shelf or to get the bad guys off the streets?
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
Is it more to get these things off the road or to get the bad guys off the street?
Well, I think they go hand in hand. Most of the time, if people go about this, there are legal ways that you can obtain, these types of devices. But when you take them and then you illegally use them for criminal acts, then that becomes a real problem. So we have criminals possessing illegal NFA weapons. So I think it goes hand in hand. We need to find out, where they're being manufactured, who's putting them out on the streets, and then go after those individuals so that we can kind of cut the source off so that more don't reach the streets and cause damage.
The complaint details about how switches can be made of a polymer commonly used in 3D printers. And how prevalent is that, and how can we stop that from happening?
Unfortunately, it's becoming more prevalent across the country. ATF sees that more prevalent. We are addressing, those types of things. And unfortunately, with the lower price of 3D printers, the the abundance of the materials necessary. It's very easy to obtain them, and you can go on the internet and figure out how to manufacture them yourself. So once again, it boils down to the communication between law enforcement agencies. Once someone sees that, getting in contact with either ATF or FBI so that we can, utilize our resources to identify where the source is coming from. And then HSI as well, when they're coming overseas. I mean, because there are several different ways that they're making their way into our communities. So.
I think I heard you say the goal was to shock the pipeline. To what extent was the pipeline shocked today? There were, 9 arrests were all involved with these switches? Or?
Right, you want to speak to that? Or, I mean, I just say this. So when you find a pipeline that is putting out those types of devices, you never really know how many they've already put out or where it's already impacted or where it's gone. So the moment you shut that down, you can almost be rest assured that you've prevented crime in at least one community that's seen them, and probably many more outside of that community. Because as U.S. Attorney Totten stated, there was connections to other cities as well that this investigation was involved with. So you can say that shutting this pipeline down today has impacted other cities across the western side of Michigan.
How many people, individuals were involved in that? I think you said 5 federal arrests in 4 states? Or?
Yeah, there were 5 arrests today. There is one person, as we detail in the press release, has gone out that is still at large that we're searching for. There were a number of people who had already been detained that are being charged. Again, we have 11 defendants that are being charged today. And just going back to the question of, how significant is this action, I'll just add, and I think ASAC Porter would probably agree with this, it's not every day that 200 federal agents come together to execute an action like this. I think this was a significant action to really try to disrupt these pipelines.
Yeah. How did investigators put it together that Benton Harbor, what was happening in Benton Harbor and Grand Rapids were related? Connecting the dots.
I don't know if there's a lot I can add about that at this time. I think as investigations go, you start out with one lead and you just continue to try to build and build and build, and that's certainly what happened here. The investigation started in Benton Harbor, but it took us into other communities as well.
And what made this investigation come to a head today? Was it the unsealing of the complaint documents, or why today?
The investigation has been going on for over a year, and the operational decision was made. Today we would execute multiple search warrants, multiple arrest warrants, and then the charges were unsealed at 12 noon, and that gives us the ability to talk about what's in the complaint.
You said one person is still at large. Do you guys have any leads as to where that person may be, or is there anything the community can do to help bring this person in?
Yeah, I think I'm going to refer you to our press release. You'll see that we have an image of the person as well as the name and some details. Certainly, we would welcome any input that the public might have, and there's information about how to do that in the bottom of the press release.
Can you specify where these switches have been found or used in crimes? I know you said the state, but specifically like here at West Michigan, or have they been more prevalent on the east side of the state?
I don't know if Craig or David, if that's something either of you want to speak to. I would say we don't want to get in. It's important that we stay to what is the contents of the complaint that we filed today and we've unsealed. I don't want to go beyond that and speak about what other evidence we might present when we get in court. We'll be making those, sharing that information once we get into court. But is there anything more generally, David or Craig, that you want to share?
No.
Okay, we'll leave it at that for now.
What's Tribal's police role in this? I understand everybody else involved, but their particular involvement.
So I don't want to get to the specific of the operations. I will just say that all across Michigan, our tribal law enforcement partners work with other law enforcements, very integrated in different matters. There's agreements set up to allow that kind of cross-jurisdiction interaction, and they assist on many different operations, and they did so here.
When did you start seeing switches nationwide? When did they start talking about it?
Craig, any thoughts on that?
Sure, sure.
They've become far more prevalent. We've seen them nationally probably about 2 years, 3 years. And the types have varied quite a bit. You know, we've kind of been able to, from a national perspective with ATF, look at them and kind of see where they're coming from, and you know, there's certain aspects of different types of switches that come out. So there's prevalent switches across the state, Florida to Puerto Rico, Texas. There's some significant situations where the switches were actually used on law enforcement officers when they went to approach a vehicle. Individual got out and I think he fired more than 30 rounds at Houston police officers, I believe it was. So that was nationally televised and everything. So we are seeing them across the country. It's just the various types, especially when you get to the 3D printing, that becomes far more difficult, and it goes more locally to determine where in that community or city or whatever within that state is actually the responsible party for that. But we do see 3D printing operations through ATF around the state. We haven't gotten to that point where it's like, you know, but it is something that we know nationally is on the rise, so we anticipate the rise in Michigan, and we're just prepared for that as well.
And if I may, where primarily overseas are they coming from?
What we're seeing a lot of China, significant amounts from China.
The complaint details about how in June DeMarcus Grilly was arrested with a switch-equipped ghost gun, and how those can be dangerous because, you know, they're not stamped with serial numbers. Can you talk about the danger of ghost guns and how it's related?
Sure. So ghost guns commonly they're commonly referred as ghost guns because primarily they're not stamped with serial numbers. So as a law enforcement tool, that allows us or investigators to have a sort of starting point when we recover firearms because they're serialized. When you manufacture a firearm that's not serialized, then you essentially have no starting point. You have to work on different areas, and what ATF has perfected in trying to do that is we look at other features on manufactured guns, privately manufactured guns or ghost guns. So what we try to do is look at particular features. We collaborate with our local law enforcement as well to see if they've seen these types of things, and then we try to narrow down where the source of it was to go back to cutting that pipeline off again, because a lot of times, although it's not illegal to make a firearm, privately make a firearm for yourself, it is illegal when you start to sell those and deal without a license. So we have to look at all of those contingencies when we're doing those investigations too. So.
Hey, Chief McGinnis. Your turn. I've seen you so angry with gun violence in this area. This has got to make you feel better.
You know, it's funny you mention that because first thing I thought about that conniption I had on TV, and absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. And we're seeing this is going to have an impact. And we're seeing, you know, again, going back to, you know, not just here, but the work on the street that our guys are doing, again, between us and Benton Township. You know, we have some great officers that are getting guns off the street. They're making arrests. They are coming across switches, but it's because of who we have working for us that I think has also had an impact. So it does please me to be able to stand here with some results because, again, I was upset. It is very difficult to try to work a case, especially with people not coming forward. Now, I can say proudly since then, people have been coming forward, and some of our efforts to solve some crimes happen because citizens are now finally coming up and speaking up. So it's all kind of worked together for the good, and we're greatly appreciative. But again, I got to commend my guys, the boots on the ground, that kind of get things started to hand over to the detectives, to hand over to, you know, this type of effort. So.
Last question, sir.
Was the drug charges significant? I know that was mentioned, at least in our initial, my initial email about coming here.
You know, there will be, as you'll see in the complaint, several narcotics offenses that were charged. I think, as I tried to focus in my remarks, I think the heart of what we did today is on the firearm sides, and particularly on a conspiracy to, in some cases, manufacture and distribute the firearm conversion devices, but there will be some drug charges that appear as well.
One more thing to offer.
Please.
Question was asked earlier about, the purpose of the day, right? Is it to get the devices off the shelf? Is it to take bad guys off the street? How prevalent or how significant does today's activity, shock the pipeline, so to speak? It's all those things. We all know the problems that these devices and these violent offenders cause our communities. And as referenced by the chief and the U.S. Attorney, this is not an everyday effort for all of us, but this is by no means something that we do once throughout our careers either. We're not going anywhere. We're here with the chief. We're here in Southwest Michigan, and you're going to be seeing more of this. It's important to us. Thank you.
Came in, that'd be awesome. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Assistant Special Agent in Charge Calamai's first name Craig is spelled with a K, not a C. So I want to.
First name C.
It's a C. I'm totally wrong. Never mind. Ignore me.